I'd have been very tempted to go to the rugby. No, I wouldn't. It's not this week, I wouldn't, because this, I think we can all agree on this. Not sure what else we can agree on, probably quite a lot of things, but we can all agree these are very peculiar times we live in. This is an extraordinary time. If you've read the newspapers over the last week, they are absolutely extraordinary. If you just arrived in this country from nowhere and didn't know anything that's gone on, you would think, what on earth has happened? A complete lunatic has taken over the leader of the opposition. This is mad. This is a madman that they've got here. I was every day more and more extraordinary things that he's being accused of. I thought, I'm going to pick up the papers tomorrow and see that he's proposed women-only gravity. And men will all have to float into space. I thought there'll be headlines such as Corbyn Laden makes all your pets be Muslims. Right? Quotes with old women saying, my hamster doesn't like facing east, it's not fair, I'm not voting Labour again. It was mad. This is not as mad as the real ones. The real one that said Jeremy Corbyn, I promise this is real, the Daily Mail, Jeremy Corbyn voted in favour of asteroid that will wipe out humanity. That's a real one. Now, I don't know how much impact, you would think the rest of the arguments really, what he has to say about the railways doesn't really have a lot of importance, given that we're just going to be a barren desert floating off through the cosmos once the asteroid's done its job. There was a real one, the Times. Neighbours often see Jeremy Corbyn, these are exact words by the way, neighbours often see Jeremy Corbyn riding around his area in a Chairman Mao style bicycle. A Chairman Mao, because you know where bicycles are most ridden, the country that has more of them than anywhere else, China. And you know who used to run China? Chairman Mao. Therefore, the fact he rides a bicycle means he's going to force us all to grow rice and eat dogs. There's no... it stands to reason. And then, even that, they managed to top it. Do you know what he did? This lunatic madman, do you know what he did? He went to a war memorial for the Battle of Britain. He didn't sing the national anthem. Now, the whole Second World War is in ruins. We might as well not have bothered. We might as well give the country to Hitler because he didn't sing the national anthem. How dare he? And this is a disgraceful slur. What a slur this is, what an insult to the pilots, because as we know, one of the pilots was the Queen. She shot down 5 enemy aircraft, Luftwaffe over Folkestone, the Queen. No wonder she was so insulted. I've no idea whether he should have sung the national anthem or not, but really, this is quite insane what they're trying to do. The Daily Mail had a 2-page special feature, a little mini novel they called it, that they wrote, that they published about 2 weeks ago, so before he was elected. And the idea of this was Britain in 2021, and Jeremy Corbyn is the Prime Minister. And it started off with the whole of London is on fire, because once you bring back nationalised railways, we all know that causes fires. As any scout will know, that's the quickest way to start a fire, is to nationalise a railway and walk up it goes. And then the Premier League collapses. I wasn't quite sure of the logic of this, but I'd given up on the logic by then. The Premier League just collapses because Jeremy Corbyn's in, and I don't know, all the footballers go, how can we possibly play football when Jeremy Corbyn is Prime Minister? And then the police flee, and eventually a helicopter comes and takes him out. Well, they've mixed it up with Vietnam, I don't know. And yet, despite all of this madness, every day this goes on, despite all of this, the maddest thing of all, well, 2 mad things that happened to me personally, and you'll all have your own ones. I couldn't believe either of these. I thought, has this happened? Last Saturday, I was driving down towards Brighton, listening to the commentary on the football, and the football commentator said the words, and while we're waiting for Chelsea to take that corner, a reminder that Jeremy Corbyn has been elected leader of the Labour Party. And I wonder whether I should pull over. I was a danger to other motorists. This can't really have been said. On Monday, I took part in an event at which 2,000 people came to. There was a huge picture of Jeremy Corbyn there. It was a great celebration, and I was sort of part of the whole business there of being on this thing. And as I got outside, I passed someone waving tickets who was a tout, saying the words, "Get your Jeremy Corbyn tickets, buy, sell, Jeremy Corbyn tickets, buy, sell your Jeremy Corbyn." Now, in the most mad, chaotic dream I have ever had, there has never been one where 2,000 people are crammed into a hall for a Jeremy Corbyn night with touts selling to people going, "Please, please, I'll give anything for a ticket for the Jeremy Corbyn night." And this has happened for a reason. It's not everybody can even grasp. I'm not sure I can grasp at the reason. Some people clearly have a great deal of trouble. Those people who ran the Labour Party up until a week ago, they seem to have a difficulty in working out why it's happened. One of the reasons, a lot of them said, was because outside agitators were taking over the Labour Party. Infiltrators. Remember this, it seems so absurd. A month ago, infiltrators. 300,000 people have joined the Labour Party, but they're all infiltrators. It's the same as the 1980s. They did with this with militants. They must have got so exhausted by 1985 that they had to have 30 years rest before doing it all again. The most common age of the person who has joined the Labour Party in the last 3 months is 18. Now this shows you how canny these militant people are, because in 1985 these people were minus 12, and even then they were planning to take over the Labour Party from outside. This is what they've been doing. Tony Blair, he made various interventions, all of which I'm sure were very influential. He made one of his most famous intervention was to calmly try to persuade people not to vote for Jeremy Corbyn, using the words, "If your heart is telling you to vote for Jeremy Corbyn, then you need a heart transplant." And of course it turns out 250,000 did. 250,000 people need a heart transplant, which could clog up the NHS quite considerably. In fact, far from the vote being fiddled because of outside infiltrators, it would have been an even more emphatic victory for Jeremy Corbyn, because there were a number of people who quite legitimately should have been able to register to vote and weren't allowed. And I count myself amongst that number when I got a nice little email saying that I didn't share the aims and values of the Labour Party. So I couldn't vote. I was very tempted to write back, so I'm really sorry, I've been busy, I didn't have time to invade Iraq. But and so I would really, if anyone's got any influence here, I would really like, now that Jeremy Corbyn has been elected, I'd like to be the person, if possible, to be able to personally inform Tony Blair that now his membership is being revoked as he no longer shares the aims and values of the Labour Party. But it has come from somewhere. It's not just come from nowhere, this thing. It's come from somewhere. We didn't predict it, but it's come from somewhere. And it's come from somewhere because they have had it their way for so long. 20 years, 30 years, they have had it their way. They, being the people who decide the way this world should be organised, is that nothing has a right to exist unless it's making a profit. All those people that Jenny were talking about, they don't make a profit. The citizens' advice, that doesn't make a profit. So that is at the bottom of priorities in the society that we live in. Other things make a profit. Armed make a profit. So those are going to be a priority. The businessmen, the bankers, these people who make vast profits, they're deemed to be the most important people in society, the people that need to be protected. They have had that for so long. The debt that has been run up by these very people who said that we have to entrust society to them. We must be given society to look after because we know how to make a profit, and that is the only way in which we can ensure that there are all the things in society we need. Those people across the globe bankrupted the economy, and that is why the answer to that over the last few years has been, well, yes, we've got to all this debt now in this country, and so we've got to get the money back off the people who've created all this debt, the people who've taken all the money, we've got to get it back off them. And do you know who's taken it? it? The poor, that's who's taking it. It's the poor, it's the people, the homeless, people, these are the people on working tax credits, these people, they've got too much money. The poor bankers, they've got none left. The poor sods, we've got to get it off of the poor and give it to them. They have had it their way. So that society has actually got poorer for people, for massive numbers of people, not just the poorest either, but for anybody who would consider themselves in the middle, if you like. When I was a teenager, it seemed to me that life would get a little bit easier for each passing generation. That's what I thought would happen. But it's got worse, it's harder, it's more insecure. When I was 18, I thought, well, what will happen is that whatever education you want, that will be paid for, because it's decided that society benefits really if people are educated. And then the worst thing that can happen is that in terms of your house, you'll get somewhere to live. It'll be a council house and it'll be looked after and you'll pay and that'll be fine, and then you'll get a pension. But all of that has been ripped up now. That you have to go to university to get a job at Aldi, it seems. And then you come out of there 50 grand in debt. While you're paying that off, you're saving up to get a house because there's no council ones left and they're getting ever more ridiculously priced. And then at the end of life, there's just more insecurity than ever because the pensions are pretty well. There's no guarantee at all that you're going to be looked after by the state whatsoever. Always make me laugh. You get these sort of characters you get on the various economics programmes, the One Show or something like that. They'll have someone talking about pension. They'll say, we've just got to get used to a world in which during the years when we're working, we need to be putting a bit more of our money aside every month towards our pension. And I think most people must sit at home thinking, what extra money are you asking me to put aside? And they think people are sat at home going, oh, thank Christ that bloke told me where to put all the extra money. I've been wondering what to do with it. I can't get round the house. I can't get to the fridge. There's money everywhere. I've been going to the zoo and giving it to polar bears. What extra money? And they've had it that way for so long. And one clue that this hasn't come out of nowhere is that it hasn't just come out of nowhere here. It's come out of somewhere in lots of places. In Greece, in Spain, where there's a million people supported the Occupy movement, and out of that a new party arrives called Podemos, Syriza. For all their problems, it came out of somewhere. In Scotland, the Scottish National Party, seen as this tiny, fringe, unimportant party, suddenly, when they lose their referendum, suddenly, because they're apparently offering an alternative to this, what would become known as austerity, they win almost every seat in Scotland. And so it happens here as well. And it was hidden because of the election. It seemed so miserably horrible. Poor Sam, I gave him about half an hour's phone call in my utterly distressed state on May the 8th, and that's it, that's the end of everything. But it wasn't that, it wasn't the end of everything. It wasn't, because the reason, it seems to me, no one can work out exactly why Labour lost the election, but it seems to me it didn't lose it because it was too left-wing, and it didn't lose it because it was too right-wing. It lost because no one was really listening. Not many people were listening to what they said at all. It didn't matter. No one trusted them. Not many people. They didn't believe them. I don't mean, obviously people like Jake were doing everything they can to redress that, of course. But and many brilliant people inside the Labour Party were doing that. But people weren't listening. It didn't seem to matter. Ed Miliband could say what he liked, yeah, but he's not going to do it. Because Labour for years and years had played the business game. They'd said, we are the same as you, yes, of course there is too much debt, of course we must hammer the poor, of course we by and large accept your ideals. And so it didn't inspire anyone. And then along comes Jeremy Corbyn, and it says it completely the opposite. Says that the problem is the profit. Says that the problem, for years, this has been the case, by the way. For years it's been the case that anybody on the television programme, on Question Time, the person who says it's the bankers who are to blame, gets the round of applause, even from people who might have applauded the UKIP person 2 minutes before. For years it's been the case that growing numbers of people have been saying to themselves, I'm not sure what's wrong, but this is wrong. For years, people know, they might not personally be affected, but they know someone who ends up going to see Jenny because of some appalling injustice, because their credits of their because their benefits have been cut because they've got 5 minutes late to some appalling interview that they shouldn't have to go to at all. All of this organised, by the way, by a chap, Ian Duncan Smith, who I'm glad you mentioned the bedroom tax. There's someone who should be made to pay a bedroom tax, who lives in a mansion that has 8 spare bedrooms. To his credit, he's worked hard for that. He was given it by a relative. This state of affairs has been making people cross for years, and Jeremy Corbyn is the latest in a line of characters like Nicola Sturgeon, like the people in Syriza and so on around Europe, who because of their tenacity, because of the years of just keep saying the same thing, suddenly find themselves at the head of this enormous movement. And that's what makes this very different from the 1980s. People might remember the 1980s and Labour Party being left-wing and losing the election and so on. But this is very different, because in the 1980s, the movement left inside the Labour Party came from within the Labour Party. This has come from the rest of society. It's had a reflection inside Labour, but it's come from outside as well. It's hundreds of thousands of people who never thought that they would be part of the Labour Party, seeing something and going, there is a vehicle for a message of a different sort of society, where the Ian Duncan Smiths are not seen as the people who are the most productive, the people who should be protected. And so this movement has come from outside, and it's that movement, I think, that is going to be the one thing that can protect Jeremy Corbyn against the mania of the press, against all the filth and squalor and hatred that is thrown against him, against all the irrationality, and of course the many people within his own ranks. But it will be very, very difficult for a right-wing Blair-supporting Labour MP to take part in anything that undermines Jeremy Corbyn if he or she knows that there is a movement in their town that involves hundreds and hundreds of people. That's what is going to be. That is what is going to be his protection. And to anyone who says, "But can it work?" I'd say, well, already it's worked to some degree. A couple of people have mentioned the refugees. Now, that was an extraordinary week 2-3 weeks ago, because you would expect that what would happen, given the last few years in this country, is that there would be a refugee crisis, that there would be an outcry, an utter outcry. Disgusting, look at them, they're coming over here, it's nothing to do with us. And David Cameron certainly thought that, because his first speech on it was to say, we do not help refugees by allowing them to come here. Because now that makes sense, doesn't it? Because if someone's just scrabbled on a boat that's not quite sunk with their family and they've just about made it to the beach, you're not going to help them out by giving them food and shelter. That's not what they want. They want taking back to the place that they came from. That's what they'll appreciate most of all. If David Cameron was in the fire brigade, he'd turn up at a fire and say, no, we're not going to put the fire out, because then you'll have to come out here onto the street, and the street's already full up. So probably best if you just learn to live with the fire that you're in. By which, and in any case, I helped support the fire in the first place, so you ought to know how to deal with it. Now, that didn't happen. The Cameron reaction started to happen, and then there was a reaction against it. First of all, Yvette Cooper, one of the other candidates for the Labour leadership, made a very good speech about the humanity of looking after refugees. And she made that speech because the ground had already shifted. There's no way 3 months ago she would have made that speech. There's no way that would have shifted Cameron to even saying, Sam's quite right, 20,000, it's hardly humane. But there's no way they would have said anything other than the same vitriolic anti-refugee nonsense that they've been saying for years. It's changed because Jeremy Corbyn was standing for leadership of the Labour Party, and because there was a completely different atmosphere on all of these issues. Already it's made that impact, and that movement, therefore, it seems to me, is the one protection he's got. If the 250,000 people that have joined that voted for him, if the 50,000 people that have joined Labour in the last week, if we go, we've joined, we've sent off, I haven't yet, I don't know whether they'll let me in yet, but if we just go, that's it, all right, we've done our bit, he'll be stuffed. He won't last very long at all. But if that group of people finds ways in every town, if the 100 people here, 150 if it wasn't for the fine health and safety laws imposed by the ecclesiastic people of Eastbourne, but if all the people here who must be in favour of what he's doing, if that becomes a movement, if that becomes people going up to the railways and leafleting people saying this is why we think the railways should be nationalised, if it's a matter of going around the estates and saying, you might have read about Jeremy Corbyn, here's the truth about what he's saying about housing. The problem in this country is that there's not enough houses because houses are only built for profit. If you're a Russian oligarch, you've got no problem getting a house worth 5 million quid next to some waterside development somewhere. If you're an ordinary person in Eastbourne, then it's not quite so simple. If there is, I don't know, I'm not going to tell you what you should do, but already there's the movement around the hospitals, obviously. All of those things, if this movement around Jeremy Corbyn becomes a movement that fights on all of those issues, then I think we've got a very, very, very good chance of changing society, regardless of, never mind thinking about what happens in 4.5 years' time, but changing society along the values that Jeremy Corbyn has always stood for. Because when they say, as the Tony Blair type people do, as the Conservatives do, as nearly all of the newspapers do, as all of the serious commentators do, you've got to stand in the centre ground. You can't be too radical, you'll never get anywhere. You've got to win over the middle ground. In a way, they're right. But the middle ground changes. That's what they forget. 30 years ago, if you were in favour of gay marriage, you were an extremist. Now you're an extremist if you oppose it, because the people who have stood and fought for those ideas have shifted the middle ground. And the middle ground that we've got at the moment is not moderate at all. It's a middle ground. It says all the people that Jenny was talking about are seen as flotsam and jetsam of society, as people who are just scum who should just be washed away, because the really important people in this society are the people at the top, the bankers, the millionaires, the arms dealers, those people. It seems to me that it will be perfectly moderate and part of the middle ground to say that in fact it's the other way round.